Yeah, Carl asked me if I would do a testimony for on here, and it's not something that I do real comfortable. And it's kind of like Ron Murray that there's things in the background they're in the background because maybe you want them to stay in the background. But I am going to talk a little bit today about kind of continuing the pre-limbic arc conversation about conspiracy theories. My my background is not exactly conspiracy, although a lot of it I can connect the dots, and they were conspiracies. I was born in 1945 back in over in Central California, which is the land of fruits, vegetables, all that kind of stuff. We were sharecroppers, which meant we lived on other people's land because everybody out there, they either worked for the government, which my father was totally anti-government, or you worked as like a sharecropper on a farm, somebody that owned this farm. Now they owned the farm because they were bought and paid for by big business. Sun-Made Raisin, Del Monte, uh, Lindsay Ripe olives. If you ever eat Lindsay Ripe olives, I can't tell you how many olives I've picked. If you've ever eaten a diamond walnut, I can't tell you how many diamond walnuts I have picked up at about a half a cent a pound. But anyway, that was all there. Uh, Everybody out there, boys, girls, men, women, we all started working at a very young age. I was out picking fruit when I was probably, I'm guessing 8, 9 years old. I was in the fourth, maybe the third or fourth grade, probably third grade, I guess. First time I went out in the orchard and picked fruit for money. And of course, the money didn't come to me, it went to our household. Where I grew up, we had a few rites of passages, especially for boys. And the first one was working in the fields without picking, without picking fruit. And one of the best jobs we had was flagging for crop dusters. We had old World War II biplanes that were hooked up for crop dusting. Now, what they were dropping on the crops back in the mid to late 50s was DDT. If you do any research, you'll find that DDT was the main agent in Agent Orange. And I will tell you in a little bit why Agent Orange and I go back so far. But anyway, we did crop dusting. What we would do is stand at the end of a crop near a road, and the crop duster would be flying down, and we would be out there flagging. And we would tell them, when to go up. Well, wind blows a lot of dust around. So we sucked up DDT back in those days, uh, well, like it was juice. We didn't know any better. The government said it was safe. It turned out it wasn't. The second rite of passage was to get a job outside of our town. And I happened to get a job with a division of forestry as a firefighter. Now, a firefighter in Central and Southern California doesn't mean you fight building fires, you fight grass fires. And even back in the 60s, the way they put out the grass fires was with either borate or bentonite or borax, that pink stuff you see coming out of airplanes as a fire retardant. What was in that, a lot of it, were just water mixed with chemicals. Some of the chemicals were for suppression. And the suppression just means they took all the oxygen out of what was burning, and it would quit burning. It was all pink so that people could see, the firefighters and stuff, we could see it coming down, and supposedly we could get out of the way of it, but you never could get out of the way of it. The third passage, rite of passage for boys especially, was either to go to college or the military. I went to college. In fact, I went to about 8 of them and never graduated because I couldn't stand the authority of them. This was back early on in my life, way before the military made me real bitter on authority. So anyway, I chose in 1963 to go in the military. Now, what was happening in 1963 was Vietnam was just starting to rumble a little bit. We didn't hear too much about it, but if you're in the military, you heard about it. And my military job was flying in what they call C-121s, and that's a big 4-engine prop job that we had all radar on there. We had just so much electronic. It was all electronics is what it was. And we would go up and bore holes in the sky for 18, 19 hours at a time. That was out of Otis Air Force Base in Massachusetts, Cape Cod. Part of what we were doing was training for Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, Vietnam, kind of began on a conspiracy. Supposedly the Gulf of Tonkin, the Americans got shot up by the Vietnamese boats, and it's turned out in history that that never really did happen. But what it did do, it caused our country to go to Vietnam in a war, and we lost over 58,000 guys from here, and millions of Vietnamese people, millions, and they're still dying from our presence over there. That was not a conspiracy theory. That was really true. But on the conspiracy, I want to go back to when I was fighting fire. We heard Ron Spence the other day talking about chemtrails, the ones you see up in the sky. Well, back in 1964, it was actually before that, probably 62 and mid 63 when I was on the fire department. I shouldn't say we, but people were talking about seeding clouds back then. And they were doing it so they could force it to rain whenever they wanted to. And they thought, well, that'd be a cool idea. We won't have fires that way. So my conspiracy goes back basically as far as I remember. And what they were talking about seeding the clouds was with aluminum. So here we are up here now in 2020, and we're still talking about aluminum. But the non-conspiracy people say, oh, those are jet trails. They're not up there doing that kind of nasty stuff. Well, believe me, they are up there doing that nasty kind of stuff. In Vietnam, I did 2 tours in Vietnam. I went over the first time in January of 1966, which was way early. And in those days, I thought I was John Wayne, Audie Murphy, and all the war heroes, and I was going to save the world and all that stuff. And it didn't take very long over there till you started finding out about the stupidity of what we were doing. None of it was true except people getting killed. It turned out later we were getting injured. We didn't even know we were getting injured. But what happened was that you become so cynical about, especially the government. When we had people in America telling us, and you people there from Australia and New Zealand, I mean, you guys were over there too, and Canadians, everybody was over there. We had all kinds of people over there, but I flew in the 121s, which was electronics, and then once a month or so, we would fly on C-123s. If you ever look up a C-123, we were part of Operation Ranch Hand, which was dropping Agent Orange on the jungles. And when you're up there in a plane, we were dropping them, 400 or 500 feet. And there was a lot of air and you're sucking this stuff up again. So it was my third time I was actually sucking up DDT. and didn't know how much I enjoyed it, but I learned later how much I enjoyed it. Anyway, 1967, my first tour was over and I came back to America, got married, made a couple of babies, and I was a lifer in the military. I loved the military. I loved the discipline. Uh, I was starting to get a little bit bitter on the politics, but I could overlook that stuff because I really liked the military. So I went back to Vietnam for my second tour. And the second tour, we were flying over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, listening to people down in the jungle. And what we had on board was all kinds of stuff that caused radiation. Again, we didn't know it. Everybody said, "Oh no, you're okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that stuff." Well, even over there, we started seeing people have kind of adverse reactions early on to it, and a lot of it didn't really manifest till they came home a little later. Agent Orange, the government now says causes, well, actually, there's 13 different presumed illnesses or diseases that it causes. One of them is, and I probably don't know how to say it right, but it is ischemic heart disease. And basically what that is, it hardens your arteries, it clogs your arteries, it causes heart attacks, it causes stuff like that. So I had 2 heart attacks. Both of them, they say, was presumed from Agent Orange. I have diabetes, which was Agent Orange. I have thyroid problems, hypo, hypo, that's where you don't metabolically take your food right. So I have that, and that's basically why I am sitting here wearing my hat. I wear my hat every day when I go out, because there's not a day that Vietnam doesn't come up in a conversation. Either it comes up because somebody sees the hat, like nowadays they're saying, you know, thank you for your service. Back then they weren't saying exactly that, although I never ran into bad stuff. But right now I wear my hat because I talk to guys about Vietnam, and I talk about Agent Orange. One of my first questions when they were in Vietnam was, how you doing with Agent Orange? And it's part of what I do to kind of get them into the program. There's a lot of politics and bureaucracy to get into the Agent Orange program. There's a lot of things you got to prove. It's very difficult, but that's kind of one of my, well, it is one of my big passions is that. When I got out of the Air Force, I got out of the Air Force in 1971, and I got out because of Vietnam. I was married with 2 little boys, and I signed back in California in September of 1970 after my second tour. And the squadron commander says, welcome to the squadron, Sergeant. You'll be back over flying in April. And I said, nah, I've already had 2 tours. I'm not going to go back. And he said, that's your job. You stay here. You stay combat ready. You go back. Well, I didn't want to go back. And when you say no in that business, you've really written your career off. So I did my 8 years and I wrote my career off. It was done. So time to get out. Well, I got out and I had PTSD, and one of the manifestations of PTSD is you can't keep a job. So I had like 16, 17 jobs in the first year trying to support a wife and 2 kids. I had become a drunk. I didn't know how to get out of it, so I went to the hospital, the VA hospital, and they said, grow up, go back to work. Well, that wasn't exactly good advice back in 1971, but that's kind of what you had. So I bummed around. We lived in Massachusetts, which was as far away from California as I could get. We kind of enjoyed Massachusetts, but then we wanted to raise our boys a little bit more in the country, so we moved to Maine. And I loved Maine. I got into all kinds of different winter sports and stuff like that up there, and I enjoyed it, but I still couldn't keep a job. So one of the jobs I got, I became licensed as a stockbroker. And I did the stockbroking for about 3 years. I loved it for a while, but then the drinking part of it came into effect, and I found out I liked drinking more than I liked calling clients about their stocks. Well, that didn't work out exactly good for a career. But I got out of that. So I got out of that and I quit that business again. And I went into the car business. And I went into the car business because there was a lot of guys in Vietnam that were in the car business, because it's really back in the early 80s and whatnot, it was a cowboy business. I mean, we've even talked, I think, on these calls about car people, and everybody's got the joke about the used car salesman. I did that for about 12 years. Again, I made a lot of money, but one of the guys, one customer came through one day, and he was a French guy from Biddeford, Maine, and he got talking to me about this business, and this business happened to be Amway. So I said, "Wow, this is pretty cool." This is back in the mid '80s, and I said, "Wow, that's pretty good. I can make all this money doing nothing but selling soap." Yeah. So I went into Amway and I went belly up like a lot of guys did, because I got some real bad advice, and I had one room filled with stuff, and that was how I was making my money. So my wife became, what do I say, very, very negative on any kind of business like that. Well, since those days in '84, I've been in probably 10, 12 nutraceutical companies selling anything from juice and pills and God, I don't even know what else I was selling. But those were the days that I met Carl. And Carl and Dan were doing things like matrices and money and stuff. And I thought, well, this money thing, I kind of like this. So I kind of got involved in money. And unfortunately, I didn't listen to Carl. I didn't listen to Dan. And I went the route of high-ups, which is high yield investment programs. And it's a good way to make a whole lot of money on Ponzi schemes and to lose a lot of money on Ponzi schemes. So I did that for, oh gosh, I don't know. I was in probably 15, 20 companies. But one time there was 4 of us that were kind of together in this little deal. And we went kind of belly up, and we were talking online. This was probably 2010, 11, and there's old Carl on there talking about this program. And I sent Carl an email, and I said, "Yeah, send me some information." And in about 30 seconds, I got a phone call back from Carl. And long story short, I got involved with a couple of those programs, and I didn't do good at all. I didn't want to recruit. I didn't want to listen to them. I had my own way of doing things. And of course, they didn't work either. But during that time, it was in about 1990, I guess that was earlier than Carl, I went to work for a company in Maine called LL Bean. And LL Bean is a outdoor company that is, they don't do anything mechanical. They don't sell motorboats. They sell canoes and kayaks. They don't sell downhill skis. They sell cross-country skis. They don't sell cars. They sell bicycles. Well, I hadn't ridden a bicycle since, I don't know, I guess I was probably a teenager last time I rode a bicycle. And when I went to work at Beans in 1990, about 1993, somebody convinced me to ride a bicycle. And my first ride was probably a mile, 2 miles And I mean, I'd smoked for many, many, many years. I was probably 60, 70 pounds heavier than I am right now. I didn't do any exercise at all except walking in a car lot, um, and maybe chasing the kids around. So it was real tough getting on a bike, but let me just tell you that saved my life. It really did. I was heading down a bad path, and the bad path was going to be more heart attacks, letting my diabetes just go to hell. I didn't care about any of that stuff. But I started riding the bike, and I started, like I say, with 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and I ended up commuting back and forth to work, and that was about a 38-mile round trip. Started doing that even in the winter. And if you've read about Maine winters, we do have winter up there in Maine, a lot of winter, ice and snow. And there were 4 or 5 of us that rode to work every day in the ice and snow. All during this time, I was still trying to build network marketing. I knew it was the answer, but I could just never, ever, I couldn't get there. And I don't know why, but it was just, part of the deal. I just couldn't get there. But I was loving my bicycles. And it was during that time up at LL Bean when I found out that Agent Orange had done a pretty good tattoo on me. And that's when I had my first heart attack. I'd been riding a bike, and I thought it was the bike, but it wasn't the bike. It was the heart attack. I haven't had to have open heart surgery, but they told me I couldn't exercise anymore, which proved wrong too. I kept exercising, kept riding the bike, had another heart attack, found out I had the diabetes. They said, well, you're going to be on all these meds and all this stuff. And it was mentally, it was a tough time. It wasn't anywhere I wanted to be, but at any rate, during all this time I was talking to Carl, we did a few programs together, and he showed me how to lose a little bit of money. I found other ways to lose more money, and I did, and he did. And when Carl tells you he was short of temper, Carl was short of temper. More than once I've seen Carl hang up the phone and say, this meeting's done. Bam, and it was over. That's kind of a side story, but anything you hear on here, they're all kind of true. So life kind of goes on. I retired from LL Bean in 2005. We started doing winter trips down here to Florida, and I loved going back in the sunshine. I hadn't been in sunshine since I was a kid. So we kind of became snowbirds. We kept houses up in Maine. We kept a house down here. I was still playing in the market. I still had money. We playing with the 401s, rolling those and whatnot. I retired in 2005, and retirement is the best job I've ever had, and I'm not going to give it up. But in April 25th, I had a bad cough of this year, April 25th, just that whole COVID thing had just started. And I went to the doctor and I said, I got to get some cough syrup. He said, well, I'm not going to give you cough syrup till I check you out a little bit. So they checked me out, and he said, I'm not giving you cough syrup. You got something pretty seriously wrong with your lungs. So they put me in an ambulance and took me in the hospital. It turned out I had a virus, but it turned out it wasn't the positive COVID. It was the non-positive COVID and pneumonia. And being age 75 and having all of these things, all the check marks of not being healthy and all that jazz, I checked all the boxes. They were there. So they put me on oxygen. I was on oxygen for a few days in the hospital, and back in April, end of April, a COVID test, you know, where they stick that thing up your nose. I mean, they said it would take about 2 weeks to find out if I was positive. So I'm sitting in the hospital and it turned out it was like 5 days in there, and we didn't know what was going to go on. Didn't know if I was going to come out feet first or how I was going to come out. But anyway, while I'm in the hospital, I think the third day, I got another call from my buddy Carl, or an email saying, Don, I'm in this new health thing. And I thought, oh my God, here we go again. Here's another juice going to come down the road. So I said, no, thanks. And I remember exactly what Carl said. He said, well, you're going to go on quarantine and you got nowhere to go. You can't even go out on your bike. So I got you for at least 2 weeks. So I was still in the hospital. That was on a Thursday, I think. And then Saturday, they released me from the hospital. And I was on 14-day quarantine, and I had to stay in the house for 14 days. And that meant no biking. I already had not been biking for about a month before that because I was sick with this pneumonia and stuff that I was trying to ignore. So anyway, I got out, and it was about May 1st when I came to my first Zoom meeting with Limbic Art. And like most everybody else, I said, this is kind of foo-foo. But what I did know was about the mental part. I did know that that your attitude. I mean, I've been in the dumps years ago, but for a long time, and I knew you could get out of it just by your voice. I mean, they used to get so mad at me at a car dealership because I'd hear people whining and complaining. I say, you know, you're here, it's your fault. All you have to do is make the choice. Just say yes. And that was back, you know, like I say, in the 80s. So I knew about this stuff. I used to read an awful lot. You know, all the books that everybody here knows, The Magic of Thinking Big and Norman Vincent Peale and all those. So I knew you could manifest this stuff, but I just, you know, I'd get positive on it for a while and then it just kind of let it go. But anyway, I got involved with Limbic Art, and I got to tell you, one of the problems I had with Limbic Art was that I heard a lot of people say, oh, I got pain. You know, my friend Ron Murray, you know, God bless him. I mean, 63 years of pain. I'm 75 and I've never been in pain. I mean, I was in the hospital. I didn't have pain. Diabetes doesn't cause me pain. Heart attacks didn't cause me pain. Agent Orange didn't cause me pain. It was all mental stuff for me. I mean, it was physical, but nothing ever hurt. So I'd hear these people and they say, oh, I took the pain or the stuff. And I said, man, this isn't my business. I shouldn't be in this stuff. I don't have it. I have no pain. So I don't know how I heard about cardio, but one of you guys or one person on here or something said something about cardio. So I put in cardio and I started riding my bike again. And I got up to another 20, 25 miles a day, and I wasn't hurting, which I should have been hurting because I hadn't ridden in a month. And riding 25 miles at 75 years old is not done every day. I mean, I got to admit, I'm a little different on that biking part of it, that I don't get hurt. And I think right now I can do all of that because of Limbic Art. I thought it was all cardio until about a week ago. I forget who it was, but they were talking about the custom boost. And I just kind of let it run. I went down, I put every ingredient that was on that custom boost. They were 90%. I think I had 37 things till I got down into the 80s. So I just checked them all off. I said, yeah, this is cool. This is cool. And it didn't affect my biking, but what it did affect was my sleeping. I'm 75, and for 55 years, I don't think I've slept more than 1, maybe 2 hours at a time. when I put that custom boost on the second day after that, and that was probably last maybe Thursday or Friday, over the weekend, I had a couple of days where I had 4-hour sleeps, which, I mean, that was mind-boggling for me. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble on here, but I got to tell you right now, I'm doing the custom, and it's going to be real hard to get off of custom. I still have cardio running, although somebody said put on prosperity. So now I've got that on as a supplemental. I haven't done a boost for it, but I plan on doing that. And I will tell you that here I am, 75. Yesterday, I rode 26 miles on the bike. I played pickleball singles, which is like tennis, for 2 hours. And then I came on the Zoom call and I said, this is pretty doggone cool. Well, I heard two things yesterday on the call, and one of them was from Harvey, and he said he's in Olympic art because it works. Well, it don't get any simpler than that. It does work. It maybe manifests differently for everybody, but that was a cool thing he said. And the other one was from Alex. I don't know, Alex, I don't think he's quite 75. What is he? Maybe 25, if that. I'm not even sure he's 25. But he said he feels good. He said, and I don't know exactly what he said, but he said, if you're healthy, you feel better, your mood gets better. And I said, that's exactly where I am. I feel so good mentally and physically, and I know it's because of what I'm doing here with Olympic art. So thank you very much for listening. Hope everybody enjoys their life. It's all a choice. Thanks.